Okay, so I'm gonna go over the runtime code for the ATO chain, the provenance chain, as it is today for our stage 1 demo, as I spec'd out earlier. I did go ahead and add a few more extra things, including a council and treasury. It's just configured to the default, so it's not very realistic as far as how we would want it for ATO, the testnet, or the Canary, whatever, or the mainnet. But it's more just of a demo of how we can start bringing these interesting bits in, so that we essentially, it looks like we're creating this decentralized art collective consortium for collectors and dealers and just enthusiasts. So with Substrate gives us a bunch of modules that allow us to sort of generalize out and abstract out the core components of most blockchains, including the networking, the database layer, and so we can just focus on the state transition code, which is what we describe here in the Palettes archive, and then that makes it easy to on-ramp onto existing interoperability networks like Kusama and Polkadot. And so just before I get into this, to show you what Kusama actually is, Kusama is a value-bearing canary chain, not quite a testnet because it has value, real value, for Polkadot. And it's live at the moment, and it's running and you can see the things that are happening. So there's a treasury where the network stakeholders can decide where slash balances can be deposited towards. So the treasury will essentially become this decentralized method of funding different projects for the improvement of the network and different chains that plug into the interoperability of this chain. And Kusama will sort of be the in-between stage between the testnet and the main Polkadot network, which will be much more valuable. So we really don't have that much leeway for mistakes, right? And you can see that there's a council that has some special privileges to veto, well, not veto actually, but some special privileges to vote on particularly difficult things that should be privileged and should not be open to just anyone that happens to hold tokens. The democracy tab, anyone can participate and vote on these things like the validator count, etc. And as you can see, it's very decentralized and very robust and anti-fragile. And these are some of the modules that we're going to be bringing into ATO in the future, I believe. Well, I hope to, as a measure to decentralize. But that realistically is a multi-year plan, and to do it right, we really need to move in a more calculated way than just copy pasting how these existing networks work. But yeah, so that's what that is, and this is how our chain will look. So I'm going to subscribe to the chain that's running here, which is actually not running. The entire code is written in the Rust language, which is kind of like C++, but a bit more, with a lot more guarantees regarding memory safety. So it's a lot safer for most people to build this type of programming. So I've already compiled it for the demo, and I'm going to go ahead and purge the chain. So we start from block 0, and if we start it up in development mode, we see that it's a proof of authority chain. And for this chain, I've just seeded some test accounts with a bunch of native tokens, and I've also created some other configs, Genesis configs, that will come into play later. So now we have our chain running. It's importing blocks and it's creating blocks. We can see it's not syncing to anything else because obviously I'm the only one running the chain at the moment. But so our UI, this generic UI, has been able to detect which modules are available here, how it's been configured, so we can play around with submitting calls and exploring the storage, the chains, the state of the chain, and we do that by kind of like with Ethereum, where it exposes an ABI. This substrate-based chains expose a metadata, which you can just get like this, and it's essentially an encoded version of a gigantic JSON blob, and this is pretty much just a structure that describes the storage items, the calls that you can make from the UI or from any client, the events that are going to come out, and the types, how they're going to be typed, along with some documentation. And that's how this general UI is able to make sense of different types of chains that are built on Substrate. And so our job as building a single specific node is, once we're building the UI, will be to do a similar job with decoding the information that comes out of the node. So there's still quite a lot of work for the UI, but we can get started already just by submitting a nomination. So to mitigate that problem with anyone submitting any number of submissions to be stored on chain, we have it go through this initial nomination process. So anyone can submit a nomination who has a balance, except when you do submit a nomination, you will have to pay some fee, some transaction fee, so you can't just spam the network, and B, you're gonna have to have some money reserved. So this money, this native token, is going to be reserved in an escrow until either it is rejected or accepted into the actual archive. That's how I'm calling it for now. And when it is rejected, then the idea is we're going to slash it and put it into the treasury so that the council can later decide what to do with those funds, and it can go towards whatever you can imagine, like spending that money on. It's kind of like a government with their treasury, or except more specialized. But for now, it's just gonna get slashed if you don't get in. If you do get in, then you just get the money back, and in the future maybe you'll get some more money from the authorities or something like that. But we can get more creative. For the sake of the demo, it's just gonna return whatever you sort of staked. So this title is going to be encoded down to bytes. In our UI, we're going to have just a form that's going to say, for example, Starry Nights, and then we'll just base64 encode to hex that, and it'll 64, and that'll give us some bytes, random bytes. But yeah, so for the demo, the exact byte here doesn't matter as long as it's consistent, right? And same idea with the first exhibition. We submit a latest sale price with some dollars. So this is the contentious part that the authorities are going to have to vote on. And now if we explore what is here, then that's not working for some reason. That's because I didn't register the types. I registered it in the wrong chain. 1 second. Going to edit this out for sure. Okay, so register the types, and then now we can see, yeah, okay, so the blocks are coming in, and if we explore nomination, so we can see nomination IDs, there's one, 0 index, so at the 0th index we see that's what's been put in, and the status is that it's nominated, so it's not actually in the archive actual. In here it's just none, as we expect, and then we put in some timestamp, that's just a Unix time, and in the future this in native will have to use some off-chain oracle or an oracle that's part of the part of Polkadot, in order to fetch that price. So we submit the price in dollars, and then the chain will itself determine what the conversion is at that moment. Okay, so the next steps will be for the authorities. As you can see, the authorities are here. There are 4 authorities, so 3 is the majority. So we need 3 of them to vote yes for it to go through. So just go through and sign and submit for our votes. Alright, so before I do the third one, when it will actually go through, we can see that the votes are also submitted on chain with your account ID and then true or false, based on yes or no, your vote. So Charlie will also vote. Go ahead and vote. We can do no for Charlie just to see, and I think Alice Dash was the last one. You can see here. So as you can see, the UI here is super generic. It's not like the most amazing UX, because you can't have the most amazing UX for every single possible combination of chains. So it'll be up to us to build a specialized UI for this. All this functionality. So now that that is finally submitted, we see a new archive entry has immediately gone through. The nomination bond has been returned automatically to Alice. That was the nomination bond. These are the votes that happened before. And then so if we look here now, we see the artwork has actually gone onto the actual archive, and the nomination is now just no, the default value. So this nomination has been removed, and it's actually moved into the archive. And once it's moved into the archive, it will have a price history. So this is a history of prices. Currently there's only one, since it was just inducted into the archive, but we can also now go ahead and do an update for this. So this can go through a similar governance process, and I think it should, but for the sake of the demo, it's just anyone with the correct authority key will be able to update the latest sale price. So this latest sale price is going to be in dollars. The artwork ID is 0, and then let's say it's been confirmed that the latest sale. Oops, what did I do? Yeah. So okay. So we're gonna go ahead and update the sale price to something else, and that should give us a new sale price. We can verify here. So yeah, now there's a history of prices. Yeah, and so that concludes the MVP really. I do want to get into also some other things, including the council and treasury. So this council is going to be sort of just like a privileged set of people who are able to do certain things that are sort of verified by the rest of the network, and initially just by the founding team. to have some extra validity, some legitimacy within the network to make certain decisions, because not all art collectors, dealers, enthusiasts are made equal, and over time this will evolve and converge towards the most savvy group of people, hopefully regardless of the initial set. So that's this is what's been sort of abstracted as the set of authorities for this MVP, and I do want to move towards this council. But already you can see that it's not actually that much work now that we have this substrate framework, right? So Alice has submitted her candidacy, Bob can submit his candidacy, and so on and so forth. I already did that. And then these candidates will eventually become members, and these members will be able to propose motions. These motions will be governance motions regarding, maybe we should revert certain chain states, and maybe we should kick certain people, maybe we should slash certain people, and this will be add an extra layer of robustness to the network, so that we it becomes this living and breathing thing, and so that's just a quick demo of what that'll be. And the treasury some proposal overview will sort of just be a way to send money that's been collected into the treasury. As I mentioned earlier, that slashes will come into the treasury, sort of like a taxation for bad behavior. And what do we do with tax money? We use it to improve the livelihood of the network, right? So we do it by certain people who have submitted a will to build another extension on top of the network, maybe another UI, maybe a tool for easier verification of artworks. It can get insanely creative and big. And so with the account, we're gonna specify a beneficiary, and with however much money is in the treasury, we'll be able to seed, say, we're gonna give you this much money for your work. And I'm not sure there's actually money in the treasury at the moment. But sort of that's the quick overview of what those modules are able to do. And I'm also gonna go over quickly the runtime upgrade. There's a pseudo module here that's gonna allow me to just quickly demonstrate the runtime upgrade. So all the code that describes this runtime, this blockchain, this ATO chain is compiled to native as well as WASM. And WASM is this really lightweight blob of binary code that is easily interchangeable. So we're gonna be able to just set code, right, to the bytes that describe everything that's going on in the background here, everything that's going on here, all the database, all the networking layer. So if we just add some new modules here, for example, as I said earlier, we're gonna want something like an identity palette, and then compile it, get the WASM blob, and you can see here the current WASM blob is just this code translated into a language that the machine layer language, that we can simply where'd it go? We can simply upload into, there we go. We can simply upload that into here, and then we can and then that will change the logic of the code. With the pseudo module, we'll be able to do that without a governance process in the future. Well, in any sort of actual running testnet, we're going to put that through probably a council or democracy or governance process on chain. So that stuff is really exciting because you don't have to have, that's essentially all the forkless upgrade really is. And I'll send you also some links along with this demo video for when that actually happens. Gav did a demo of that at Web3 Summit a year ago, well, over a year ago. So that is it from me. And oh, I also no, yeah, that is it from me. Oh yeah, so the QR code component that I mentioned is that these accounts currently here, these are seed accounts with public-private keys, right? And those keys are currently stored in local storage here, and well, it's encrypted, so it's safe, but it's encrypted with some passwords. And the thing is that we can also have, there's a project called Parity Signer, which allows you to turn your smartphone into a hardware wallet. There you go. So you have an air-gapped crypto wallet, meaning that you can have your keys stored on this device that signs transactions and then sends back the payload via QR codes. So the information goes only over just through like visual camera communication, right? It never touches the network. So we can, this is all open source in Parity Signer, so we can actually fork this into an ATO signer, and we can brand that as this special sort of a key signing device. So you don't have to store your keys anywhere other than your phone. And so if you're an authority or a council member and you're submitting a call like this, all you have to do is scan the QR code, sign it with your keys that are on your phone, and then scan the QR code back, the signature back into the app. And then that's it. That's an extra layer of security. It's highly marketable and not much effort, to be honest, because a lot of the heavy lifting has already been done and it's all open source here. Yeah, so that's something that I wanted to go over. And if you have any questions, you can sign off here. I'm gonna go over the code a little bit if you are interested. If not, then you can pretty much just stop the video here. Yeah, so this is the actual runtime code for what describes ATO at the moment. We have the chain still running it. So here, these dependencies that we bring in are actually implemented by the Parity team and the Web3 Foundation team. So things like the treasury logic, the core substrate logic, the support sort of things like these how do we describe it, like traits that describe certain actions that you can take on the chain. That's all brought in, and we just customize it here, right? We configure it to ATO is going to be a combination of these traits, and our currency trait, our notion of currency on this chain is going to also be able to be reservable, and that's what we saw earlier in the demo. Yeah, this is the archive status, so it goes from nominated to in voting to archived. The actual artwork that's stored on chain, we can extend this infinitely, really. And I think in the future we will want to store parts of this as just a big blob on IPFS or some large file storage system that's also interoperated by another chain that specializes in doing that sort of storage. At the moment it's quite small, so it doesn't matter that we just store it on chain, on our own chain. I commented all this other stuff out because, well, doesn't add much for the demo. But yeah, we can always add this stuff in, and this is the kind of stuff that I think a council should have the authority or privilege to be able to do, rather than some random person just submitting nominations, because we don't want there to be too much activity as far as like nitty-gritty stuff like this. We really just want to keep it within a subset of the people that probably know what's going on, how to do this stuff. Yeah, so nominations look like that. And price is gonna have an in dollars value, and then in native value that's gonna use an off-chain worker in order to fetch the price from an oracle uh, uh, from on-chain. This is the part that describes all the chain state items that we saw here, right? That's all this stuff, and we can see the chain state for all these other modules as well if you so wish. So the treasury approval is going to be empty, so on and so forth. This decal module, this block here is going to be all the calls that we saw, such as submit artwork nomination. There's a fee attached to doing that to prevent spam. We make sure that whoever is submitting this has assigned their key, yeah, so on and so forth. Or create a hash so you can query by the hash of the nomination in the future. We reserve the balance of the denominator so that you're also not going to be spamming. There's a privilege call here that it didn't show, but it's not exactly something I would want in a real running chain. But what it does is someone with the pseudo key can outright reject a nomination without going through a voting process. This was really just for development purposes, but we can always add something like this in the future. So when you're voting on the nomination, that's pretty straightforward. And then you can update the current price in native tokens, or you can update the sale price. I think in reality, updating the sale price will be really the main concern. Because the current price is denominated in native tokens. Yeah, and these are just some helper functions. These are the events that are emitted from our chain, and these are the errors that are emitted from the chain. So that's really it that comes from our chain, and that's the unique part of Ato. But that combined with all this other stuff is what makes up the entire runtime. All this other stuff though was already implemented by the Parity and Web3 Foundation team, so it helps us to focus on what makes Ato unique. Yeah, so as you can see, there's Aura, that's the authority round consensus algorithm. Grandpa is the finalization algorithm, and this other stuff like balances is pretty standard for a chain. And council, as you can see, we can always just configure the stuff to be however we want it. At the moment it's configured exactly the same as Kusama. Elections fragment is this round robin way of equalizing votes and the weight of votes. It's like a game theoretical equalizer for so that it's harder to capture and game these governance processes. We saw treasury earlier. The treasury in this case is tightly bound with the notion of a council, so only the council can touch the treasury. But as you can see, it's also configurable. We can make it so like anyone can vote on the treasury. I would personally be a proponent of keeping it within a council, and I think you would too. But in theory, it's possible to extend it. This identity trait we can always bring in as well, but that's not actually there at the moment. And this is the actual archive, and all of these things put together is what makes up our blockchain. And yeah, this is actually a blockchain of our own. And so if we actually want to bring this into the Polkadot world, then, or Kusama rather for now, then we would want to become a parachain. And what being a parachain gives us is the ability to interoperate with all the other parachains. At the moment, there are no parachains, but there are several teams that are working on it at the moment, and I think it will come in any day now. Yeah. So that's the end of this quick demo. Thanks for keeping up with it, and let me know if you have any questions or suggestions for improvements. I really hope we can bring this into reality pretty soon. Yeah, cool, thanks.